Good afternoon, San Joaquin County and Stanless County. I'm your host, Raj Singh, and I have my co-host, Gurtej along with me. And we are here today with another host, which is our team member, our friend as well. And I will let Gurtej to introduce him. But today, let me tell you why we are here today. We are here to introduce our congressional candidate running for District 10, Representative Josh Harder. So before we bring him on, let's introduce Gary Singh first, then we will welcome our candidate.
Thank you very much, Raj. Today we have a very charismatic personality with us from city of Manteca, Gary Singh, who is currently a council member and running for the seat of council member in Manteca again. So very much involved in the community, always a good friend and mentor for us all. So now I request Gary to please welcome and introduce our guest.
All right. Thank you, guys. I first of all really appreciate you guys allowing me to join you guys and be part of this dynamic duo here. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our current congressman for District 10, Mr. Josh Harder, who give you a little brief history about him. He actually was born in Woodland. So if you guys do any searches, if you see anything different, it's wrong. So born in Woodland, and he was raised in Turlock and went to Modesto High. And from there, went some wonderful schools there. I'm looking at it. We got Stanford and Harvard. So I think he's had both sides covered. So with that, Josh, please welcome. And we're grateful that you can join us today. And please tell us more about yourself.
So, well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Gary, for your wonderful leadership in Manteca. I know how hard you work. I feel like I see you everywhere, and it's fantastic because we need somebody that's going to be a 24/7 leader in Manteca these days. So thank you for all you're doing, and thank you so much to Gurtej and Raj and the whole Sikhs of Tracy. I think what you have built over the last year is really inspiring, and it's incredibly exciting to have folks really digging into our community, contributing every way they can at the city level, and making sure that we have a strong and vibrant Central Valley. And I'm so excited to see the leadership from the Sikhs of Tracy. Real quick bio for me. I'm a fifth-generation Valley resident. My great-grandfather, as Gary said, started a peach farm in Manteca in 1850, 170 years ago now. I never thought I'd do anything in politics. Grew up in Turlock, was working in business. Really briefly taught at Modesto Junior College as a business instructor, but really felt that, frankly, most people in Sacramento and Washington didn't understand there was more to California, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. They didn't understand the unique set of issues that we have here in the Valley. And I realized that the biggest impediment we had to moving the Valley forward was not a lack of entrepreneurs or a lack of teachers, but a lack of political leaders with the ability to get stuff done. I'll be talking a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing, but I'm very focused on making sure that we are bringing higher paying jobs, good jobs to the Valley. We have 86,000 people that commute over the Altamont Pass from Tracy, Manteca, and Stanislaus County every single day. We've got to build those jobs here. And then we have to address healthcare. We have in the midst of a public health pandemic that is hurting so many folks across our community. We need to make sure that we're getting this virus under control and getting people back to work. And to do that, we need to bring the cost of healthcare down, addressing prescription drugs, bringing more doctors to the Valley, and that's the work that we've been engaged on over the last 2 years. So thank you so much for having me, and happy to chat about whatever's on your mind.
Well, thank you, Josh. Really appreciate that opening there, and you've covered a lot there. So I think we're going to go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into some of those things that you discussed. So I'll have Raj go ahead and start us out and go right into what we're looking at right now.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Congressman Josh Harder, for being with us today. And the first question, I think, to start off with is the global pandemic related to COVID-19. As you work in the Washington or the federal side, what is currently being done or being pushed through our federal side to make sure the people are safe regarding testing sites, facilities, to really provide those services so we can make sure we're preventing the COVID-19 virus to keep spreading and kind of keeping people safe around that?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, this pandemic is a public health crisis. And like most things that are healthcare related in the Valley, when the country sneezes, we catch a cold. We are always the first place to suffer, the last to recover in any in national challenge because we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough healthcare personnel to deal with the ravages of this disease. And so I've been focusing both at a local level as well as trying to get Washington to wake up and address the fierce urgency of this challenge. At a local level, the first thing I did was launch the Central Valley PPE Initiative. And so we got Republicans and Democrats working together to make sure that our doctors, our nurses, our frontline workers were actually going into work every day and being kept safe. I was hearing stories of nurses using garbage bags as protective equipment because they didn't have enough, especially early on in the crisis. So I didn't wait for the government to get moving because, frankly, Washington was a little too slow to pick up the pace of manufacturing. And so we found protective equipment right here. Working together, we got 60,000 masks, 12,000 face shields, hundreds of pairs of gloves and gowns to frontline workers in Stanislaus and San Joaquin County. But then we've also been working on a national level to try to make sure that we are getting the resources to get this pandemic under control. So I voted to pass the CARES Act back in March, which was a really important step. It funded more rapid testing and cut testing turnaround times in half for people in the Valley. You can't get this pandemic under control if it takes you 2 weeks to get a test result back and even know if you're positive or negative. And so, that's one of the things that we've been very, very much focused on, trying to make sure that we are getting that rapid testing across our community so we can make sure that people can go back to work as quickly and go back to school and conduct our ordinary lives as quickly and safely as possible.
Roger, muted.
I'm so sorry. Thank you for highlighting on that topic and something follow up on related to COVID as well. So what kind of challenges or issues that you're hearing from your local district, from the residents, and what are some solutions that you're looking into?
Yeah, well, I think our community has been hit hard on a number of fronts. I talked about the healthcare problem, but of course, this is just as much an economic crisis. And I've heard from so many businesses across our community what's happened because they can't conduct their normal operations. Even my dad, who runs a small business in Modesto, was closed for many months. And so one of the best things that we did was I voted for the Paycheck Protection Program, which created a very important bridge loan to and it only ended up being forgiven for most businesses across the Valley. That was the difference between life and death or life and bankruptcy for most of the businesses across our area. That effort saved 70,000 jobs just in our area, 70,000 people that would otherwise have been laid off. We also made sure that every person making less than $100,000 got a stimulus check directly in the mail. Those were good things, but they were back in March. They were 6 months ago, and we need to make sure that we're doing a second stimulus effort, maybe more focused on businesses that have really suffered, restaurants and other businesses that have seen more than a 50% drop in their customer traffic over the virus, and making sure that we're getting another stimulus check in folks' hands because the last one went towards rent and groceries in March, April, and May. And so, I think we did some good efforts that were very bipartisan, getting Republicans and Democrats to work together on the CARES Act. But unfortunately, our efforts to get a second stimulus have been stalemated, and we got to make people stop playing politics with this pandemic and making sure that we're pushing for solutions to help folks who need it most.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Now I would like Gary to keep us moving to the next part of our discussion. Gary, please go ahead.
Thank you, Raj. Yeah, and Congressman, you made some valid points there with COVID-19 and the stimulus check. The first part really showing what it ended up helping out with the individuals, but eventually, yes, there is the need is great out here, and seeing it at the local level, I definitely see where a second one could help, and also trying to help individuals get back to work. Going off of that, with this COVID, with this pandemic, we've also unfortunately seen unrest on the public safety side and our law enforcement side. Law enforcement today is unfortunately having to do more with less, but then there's also times where, as you've seen what's going on nationwide, sometimes that they're hindered. And so kind of discuss what your thoughts and views are on public safety and law enforcement and how we can potentially move forward as a nation together.
Yeah, obviously, we've seen a lot of challenges, not just in our community, but across the country. And I think our top priority should be building trust, rebuilding trust between police and the communities that they serve. I think that trust has really broken down. I think we still have a lot of maybe in the valley, but certainly when you look across the country, there are areas where that trust is basically non-existent at this point. And we've been working with a number of different folks from the NAACP. I've also been endorsed by the largest law enforcement group in California, trying to make sure that we're bringing folks together on this instead of just leading to folks screaming at each other in the streets or on cable television. I also wrote 2 bills, one to make sure that police departments had more funding to hire social workers and other folks to address the root causes of some of the challenges that we're seeing on the streets, as well as to support the families of fallen law enforcement officers, which we have seen here in the Valley even recently. And so we are working on trying to identify how do we push forward common sense reforms, banning chokeholds, requiring cameras in police cars and on officers, and having clear standards for use of force. California has much higher standards than many other states. And how do we make sure that there is a consistent, universal, national standard for what abusive force can look like? And then second, making sure that there is accountability when those standards are not met. We've seen time and time again pretty clear evidence that there are law enforcement officers that don't follow the law, and then they seem to not face any repercussions for that. And so we need to make sure that those standards are consistent, that they're high, and that also there is accountability that is being pushed. That was part of the Justice and Policing Act in Congress, which I voted for, which got past the House, which we're working to hopefully get across the finish line. And we're actually trying to identify more what are these solutions that can actually increase trust between police and the communities that they serve.
Yeah, and with that, you said it there, is that accountability is key for all sides. And I would say that even in the city of Manteca, we were fortunate enough to get a grant, and all of our officers today wear body cameras. And that's not just for their safety, but also for the individuals that they may encounter. So definitely accountability on all sides is needed, and love the push that you're doing for that. Raj, did we lose Gurtesh?
Thank you, I think so. So that's what I'm going to try to figure out. I think he's at the back stage. Gurtesh, is there a technical issue? If there is, that's fine. But if you can come back in, let's try it, because next question is yours.
And turn your microphone on, Gurtesh. I'm not very good at lip reading.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. It was a little technical difficulties. So, Josh, moving along about homelessness. So, quarter of the population that is in California, so that is across the United States, they live in California. And with COVID reducing affordability, so this crisis will take a next turn. So how do you see the future of California with respect to homelessness?
Yeah, well, homelessness is clearly an emergency all across our state and across our community. It didn't used to be this way. I remember I went to Modesto High School, and I used to drive across the 7th Street Bridge every day, and you would almost never see a homeless person 15, 20 years ago. Now you go across that same bridge, you go across Manteca and Tracy and areas in San Joaquin, and you see hundreds of homeless folks on the streets, and it's heartbreaking. And Washington and Sacramento are spending more time pointing fingers at each other than actually trying to identify how do we work together to get folks the help that they need. We need to work on two fronts. First, we need to address the root causes of why folks are on the street. Half of all of our homeless have a mental health issue or a substance abuse challenge, and so we need to make sure that we are getting them the help that they need. But then also we need to address the core problem of housing. It's not a shock that we have a lot of homeless people on the streets when the average price of a house is $500,000. There's not a lot of folks that can afford $500,000 in order to get that home. So earlier this year, earlier I think last year, I introduced a bill which would let governors declare a homeless emergency and get access to federal assistance. Think about what happens after some of these wildfires that we've seen. If a bunch of houses burn down from wildfires, you have FEMA come on in and they help rebuild and get folks back on their feet. Well, we should be doing the same thing for the hundreds of thousands of people that are living on our streets across California every day. We should treat this with the urgency that it is. If we can get everybody to the table, the federal government, the state, local officials, then we can actually make sure that we have the federal support to get people back on their feet and off the streets for good.
Sure. Thank you very much, Congressman. Just from the perspective of we have talked, so you have shared information. So from the perspective of the business owner, because we are hearing from the business owners too.
Paige, I don't think all I hear is robots. Can you hear me, Gurdesh?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? No. So Raj, you can go ahead. Okay.
How about now? Raj, you're muted.
We're so sorry that we're facing a technical difficulty. I believe
it's all good. We're all adjusting to the online world.
We're just gonna keep on going. So I think I can probably feed into what Gurdesh was saying. As far as homelessness, you kind of discussed the affordable housing issue. I wanted you to kind of also talk about some of the other wraparound services that homelessness also faces. There's many individuals out there. Yes, housing is definitely an issue, and there's, places that potentially we can make and help them get into, but they are also facing, mental issues and drug rehabilitation issues. And so, what's your thought process on that?
Yeah, it's a big problem, and I know you've been a leader in Manteca trying to make sure that folks are getting the help that they need. All too often, the way that we deal with homelessness is the police department gets a call, they send out a police officer, and the police officer, if they think that person's a danger to themselves or to the community, they maybe take him in for a day, maybe send him to the emergency room, and then no matter what, 24 hours later, that person is back on the streets, having actually gotten nothing that has helped them long term. And so, we need to make sure that we are addressing those root causes. One is we just don't have enough mental health professionals, enough psychiatrists, enough doctors to treat anybody across the valley, and especially our homeless population. We had 12 residents graduate in our district last year. One of them stayed. 12 resident doctors, one of them stayed, 11 moved away. And so, I authored a bill to create a loan repayment program, bring physicians to work in areas of need. And if we're successful at that, we'll get 10,000 doctors to come to our area and other areas like it across California just over the next couple of years. 10,000 doctors of all types, but especially in really desperately needed professions like psychiatry and psychology, to make sure that we can actually help folks deal with those problems. And that's not just focused on our homeless population, that's for everybody. And that bill is broadly bipartisan. When we got folks, Ro Khanna, who supported the Bernie Sanders campaign, signed on to it, as did Louis Gohmert, probably the most conservative Republican in the House, because he knew it would help his district in rural Texas just as much as it would help us. And so, we really need to make sure that we're addressing the healthcare shortages to make sure that people can actually get the help that they need.
Yes, and that's truly how we're going to ever put a dent in this issue. It's got to be multifaceted. We got to come from every angle. We can't just try to, there's no one fix all.
Sure. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Raj.
All right. So something related to what we just discussed about everything's interconnected, right? So looking at different angles. So next thing that's driving this questions towards is the education. I believe that is very important in order to make everything affordable, educate people. So looking at an overall perspective, cost of living here, making the home affordability, we need jobs, and the jobs are coming through educational institution. To bring more IT sector here. So what are some thoughts or your vision around that? Talking about CSU, talking about Cal Poly, or any sort of educational institution that can help these areas.
Yeah, so we absolutely need to invest in education in the Valley. And I tie this very closely to jobs. As you said, today, every single morning, or at least pre-COVID and post-COVID, we had 86,000 people driving over the Altamont Pass for work in the Bay Area. And that's a shame. I mean, think about the lifestyle of somebody who wakes up at 5 in the morning, gets home at 8, 9 o'clock because of that brutal commute, because that's where the high paying jobs are. And we need to make sure that we're bringing high paying jobs to the Valley. The best way to do that is to invest in the education system that we need, and especially one that's connected with the needs of employers in our area. We already have a lot of great employers that have ideas, but they don't necessarily have those connections to the educational institutions that they need. I'll give you an example. We have a huge shortage of maintenance mechanics, in the agriculture sector, in a lot of our manufacturing in the Valley. We need maintenance mechanics. That's a job that pays $100,000 a year. It's a very good paying job. Doesn't even require a 4-year college degree. But you can't find anybody that does it, to the degree that one of our largest employers in the Valley actually had to open a satellite campus up outside of our area because they couldn't hire people with those type of skills. Today, you can actually get a federal scholarship for a 4-year philosophy degree, but you cannot get that same federal scholarship if you want to get a maintenance mechanic certificate or something else to make sure that you can find a job, especially in an area like ours that has those real needs. And so I'm working on, I authored a bill that we were able to get a lot of support on to make sure that you can get that same federal scholarship available if you want to be a maintenance mechanic, or if you want to go and get a 4-year degree program. We have to stop telling kids that the only route to the middle class is through college, because that's not necessarily the right route for everyone. And that's one of the best ways to make sure that we can not only bring those jobs, but actually grow the businesses in the Valley that want to expand here, but can't necessarily connect with those educational institutions to do so.
Thank you,
exactly.
Congressman.
Go ahead, Raj.
So, like we always talking about, it's not just one aspect of something. We need to look at what a person wants. Do they really want to go to a 4-year program, or do they need other vocational training in order to make that living here? So that is the great way to look at it. So thank you for highlighting on that part. Moving back to Gary. Gary, you are up for your other 2 questions.
Okay, yeah. So, going off of that education side, definitely it's so important. Looking at, even when we're looking at our local community here and trying to attract companies to want to, relocate into the Valley. One of the things that we always say is, hey, we have your workforce. There's, 80, 100,000 people going over the Altamont every day. Why don't you just come here? But, one of the things that these companies always come back at us and say, well, you have our workforce today, but what about tomorrow? What about afterwards? Where's the next generation workforce? Because they're leaving the Valley. And so that's how education is so important. But the other side of it, you are correct. I think, the trades and the skills that are unfortunately a dying art, it's not just about a 4-year degree. It's also about the labor skills and the trades that are some of our unions and everyone teaches out there that are very as much important than just the degrees. So with that, I think let's kind of talk about something that you've really worked on and hard, I believe, in the last 2 years, and trying to get support from both sides of the aisle, and which is very near and dear to our Valley, and that's our agriculture and our farmland. And then going along with that, I think we can also talk about the 5-letter magical word called water. And so go ahead, Josh, share us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, water is the most important resource we have in the valley. It's probably my top legislative priority. It's why my great-great-grandfather settled here in 1850. He could have gone anywhere in the world, but this has the best soil, the best water, and that's why we're the fruit and nut basket of the entire world. And if we want to remain that way, in an area where 1/3 of jobs are directly or indirectly connected to ag, we have to make sure that we're continuing to safeguard and build on our water resources. For a long time, we've had a zero-sum mentality on water. Farmers have been fighting with environmentalists, and it's been a real bitter divide, often leading into court cases that go on for years or even decades. And I've tried to take a little bit of a different tack and try to identify, okay, what are the 80% of water projects that we can actually get common agreement on, and how do we move forward on those? And that's actually borne a lot of fruit. Last year, we've got the first federal funding for a new water project in the valley for over 50 years. It's been 50 years since we had funding from the federal government for a water project, until last year when we got it done, working with Republicans and Democrats alike to make it happen. And then I've also been fighting against, in many respects, my own party on this. I stood up to Governor Newsom when he was authoring a bill called SB1, which would have blown up the voluntary settlement process, which gets a little bit technical, but it's basically agreements that water users sign with folks to make sure that we can safeguard the long-term viability of our water resource. And so we're trying to make sure that we can actually continue to build on the reason why we all live in the valley to begin with, which is because of agriculture, and in turn because of water.
Continuing on with that, Congressman Harder, is really the question on water storage. I know that's something that's been a hot topic to discuss, and seeing all the water that goes down our river. And of course that's needed, and there's so many people dependent on that as it comes downstream. But from the top side too, is that with all the rain and when we do get abundant years, is seeing how much of that we can keep for use later. I don't know if you have some comments regarding that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I was talking about. In a drought year, there are 30% layoffs across our agricultural industry, and think about all the economic pain, all the jobs that have been lost over the last year due to COVID and this pandemic, and think what happens if we have a drought on top of this next year. It would be devastating, and we need to make sure that we are safeguarding the jobs that exist in the valley. The best way to do that is to build water storage, and that's why I was proud to get the first funding for four water projects across the valley: Del Puerto Canyon, Los Vaqueros, doubling the capacity of Los Vaqueros, which is near Tracy, and making that really work for our ag users, as well as North Valley water recycling. So really a comprehensive approach. The reason this matters to folks that are even outside of ag is just think about all the jobs that exist in your community, and think about the challenges that have happened when we have double-digit unemployment, tens of thousands of people out of work this year. Think of all that pain, and then expand that exponentially if a drought happens and we're not prepared. We know climate change is real. We know it's affecting the valley. The best way to prepare for the ravages of climate change is to invest in these water storage projects today to make sure we can safeguard our entire valley economy for tomorrow.
Yes, and that's kind of was really, Lee, and you kind of already mentioned it, which was climate change and the effects that has, not just on our water, but also on our farmland and our ag and all aspects of what we feel is very near and dear to us. Climate change has been tossed around and on both sides of the aisle, but I think in California we've obviously embraced it and taking it seriously, and I think you've kind of had some leadership with that also.
Absolutely. Yeah. Climate change is not something affecting the polar bears in the Arctic somewhere else. It's affecting the daily lives of everybody who lives in the valley, whether it's from droughts or these devastating wildfires that we have. And that's exactly why we're working on this.
Definitely. And you know, I will like to, you know, as you can see, these last few months, it's been unfortunate for California dealing with all these wildfires. And I know there's been conversation on both sides regarding those of where, you know, should we, and that, and again, that's a toss up between the environmentalists and the firefighters out there, as that, you know, should we burn on our own and try to eliminate some of the brushes and things, or should, and as you can see over the decades, our fires have gotten in greater and greater capacity, and the loss seems to have been going even worse. So what's your take kind of on that aspect?
Sure. Well, I think we need to reduce the heat by addressing climate change, and then we have to reduce the impact of the heat by making sure that we're pushing controlled burns and other things to make sure that when the fires do come, they're not as devastating as the ones we've seen this year or last year. On the first point, you know, I've been working a lot on trying to identify what are climate solutions that can work for farmers, create more areas of income for folks in need, push environmental sustainability, and that also address the root causes of why we have this rising temperatures and rising climate in California and across the world. I wrote a bill called the Farm Act, which was all about identifying sustainability measures that we could scale up. Right now, a small number of dairy farms in California have what's called a methane digester, where they essentially burn methane. It makes more income for farmers. It, you know, instead of sending that greenhouse gas into the air, it actually, you know, harnesses it for electricity and other energy uses, and that's great. If we get every dairy farm in California a methane digester, that's the equivalent of taking 5 million cars off the road. That's a huge game changer, and one that is deeply supported by the ag community as well as folks trying to address climate change. And then we also have to make sure that we're addressing the other challenge of the wildfires, and you mentioned controlled burns, and it's very clear that I think is a contributor, and we have not actually upgraded our forest maintenance systems, and this is something I've worked on a bill with my colleague Senator Feinstein, as well as Congressman Jimmy Panetta, and trying to make sure that we're getting the support necessary for the Park Service and other folks interacting in public lands and private lands across California to make sure that we can support addressing why these wildfires continue to get so out of control. And you know, we've seen millions of acres across California burn. This cannot be the new normal. I don't think any of us want to live with the smoke that resulted this year more often.
Thank you, Congressman Harder. And yeah, definitely, you know, going off of your first point, the city of Manteca has definitely done, kind of taken that to heart. We actually have our own digester that we were able to create with multiple grants. And we've kind of come full circle in that aspect, that it's set up at our treatment plant. And at the same time, so we have our garbage trucks. We take the sewage that's coming into the treatment plant, and the digester converts it to CNG fuel. And then all of our solid waste trucks are actually run on CNG fuel. So we're basically got both sides that going, and really helping and doing our part in our climate control. So Raj, I'll send it to you now.
Great, and just
so
real quick time check.
We're
Unfortunately, I think I'm out of time, so I gotta run and for another event. But if there's maybe any last parting comments by you guys before I have to run.
This is it. We're ended.
No, we encourage our audience who will be listening to you later or right now, if they have a question, please send it to us, or they can directly reach out to Josh's website or Facebook page, and his staff or himself. They will respond back to you. Thank you so much, Josh, for being with us today, and we really appreciate your time and energy.
Of course. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Gary, for all the incredible things that you've been doing in Manteca and your leadership on this. And Raj, thank you for what you've done with the Seeks of Tracy. It's really inspiring. And I'm here to help any way I can. Anybody can go to heartedforcongress.com, shoot me an email anytime, and we're here to help. Thanks so much, and have a great weekend, everybody.
All right. Thank you.